Do any of you remember G4? I don't, because it was well before my time, but clearly enough people do. Probably for the wrong reasons though, as of late. Before uninstalling the app from my phone, I remember seeing a lot of people on Twitter talk about a lot of old G4 reviews and how a lot of them haven't aged well, particularly in regards to a lot of games at the time that were coming out of Japan.
Oh, the mockery of other cultures is so much fun!
But our privilege to scoff at Japan is coming to an end because very soon X-Play is going to start running on TV here.
We all know who will replace us. India, that billion-strong faux vegetarian tech support call-taking behemoth of a nation. Or the Chinese. But certainly not Japan, because while they may be technologically advanced and financially powerful, they're already in decline.
Well, we're not exactly sure how, but can you really blame us? Because who knows anything about Japanese history? There were some samurai, they periodically killed themselves, a rat learned judo, and they invented a religion that sanctifies small trees and fat guys wrestling. Then we nuked them. That's how they turned into a real country.
Obviously, I'm not going to defend these reviews because I myself find them pretty bad. However, it is important to consider that these reviews aren't just reflective of the mainstream critic attitudes of Japanese games, but also a lot of reception to anime from people outside of the fandom. And in time for its 10th anniversary, I'm making a video to reflect a certain video that is more illustrative of the very caustic attitude towards anime 10 years ago. That's right, on the 6th of August 2013, a video about a popular anime series from the 90s was put out by a then very popular YouTuber, who still commands a pretty sizable audience to this day. There is a lot of controversy regarding this channel, from a lot of stuff that's completely unrelated to the video, so I'm not really gonna go into it. I also want to put a disclaimer here to make it very clear to people that I am not trying to incite any personal attack or vendetta towards the person who made this. And also, I don't want people to assume that the person in question hold all of these views 10 years later. There's a good chance that a lot of his opinions have changed, but let's try and not to take this too seriously. I'm only remembering it so you don't have to.
14-year-old girl acts stupid, uses magical powers to look slutty and stupid, talking cat tells her how to fight crime because she's so stupid, surrounds herself with smarter girls that make her look even more stupid.
That's Sailor Moon.
What?
Yes, when I was 13 years old and getting into my classic animes, when a YouTuber I watched at the time named the Nostalgia Critic, aka Doug Walker, put out a video about Sailor Moon, one of my favorite anime series of all time, and still a very popular one. It also is probably more controversial videos, probably not as controversial as Bart's Nightmare, or To Boldly Flee, or The Wall, but still having a pretty sizable dislike among a lot of fans of the series. The Sailor Moon series, I mean. I don't really know what the hardcore Dougists think. With hindsight in mind, I'm going to be looking at this video, looking back at how a lot of the arguments really do not hold up, and also trying to deconstruct a lot of the outdated attitudes towards anime that were prevalent in the early 2010s, if not well before. Last but not least, I would probably encourage you to watch the original video before you watch this, if only so you have better context and also so you have the full story. Oh yeah, I probably also should put as a part 3 that you have to consider the context of Sailor Moon in the early 2010s, where the accessibility of the series in the West wasn't really that good at the time, especially compared to now. The series had been out of print in English countries for about a decade, and this would be only a year or two before the series and the original manga would get re-licensed. The original anime got a much better English dub only a few years after this. But of course, given the time period that this video was made, it seems like Doug's only perception was the inferior Deke dub. I'm not gonna hold that against him. If only because that was probably the most accessible to anyone who didn't know how to use a torrent at the time. Now, with that out of the way, let's go.
Do they have a villain that keeps attacking the same town?
Yes.
Do they have a tedious romance with a magic boyfriend?
Yes.
Do they repeat the same animation?
Worse than Hanna-Barbera! Well, while we're on the subject, why was something as repetitive as Sailor Moon so successful?
Well, that's some nice watermarked footage you got there, Doug.
You quickly quickly noticed that, like many animes, the best parts of the show aren't in the action, the character, the story, or the writing. It's in the goddamn opening theme song. Not only is the beat catchy as hell, but look at this animation. Look at the visuals. It's like a Van Gogh of anime kid openings. In fact, there's even a Van Gogh in it. Don't ask why. I don't care. It looks friggin' awesome. I'll allow it.
Yeah, you got me there, Doug.
I guess the only downside is the obvious American additions, like this pointless Star Wars style scroll. Yeah, because that's what girls watching this show are really into. Star Wars! They go so hand in hand, I'm surprised Lucas didn't release a more feminine version with Serena doing Darth Vader.
Wait, what? I feel like I have to explain the fact that there has always been a female audience for Star Wars. They didn't just magically appear with The Force Awakens, despite the amount of Reylos that came out of it. Women have always been a big part of Star Wars, but not just behind the scenes, but also as fans. The misconception that it's always been a boys' club mainly coming from the stereotype that boys are easier to market to and that girls don't buy action figures. Yeah, I didn't find that funny, honestly.
See if you can spot where else the Americans made some changes. They're so subtle, I doubt you'll ever notice where they geniusly slipped them in.
She is the one, Sailor Moon.
Yeah, unbelievably natural, if you were going less for action-packed adventure and more for Saved by the Bell credits.
This is really about as critical as Doug gets about the American localization of the series. Apart from one thing later on, but we'll get to that.
But you quickly discover in many respects, that is what the show is going for. At first it seems like it's going to be a big, albeit audience-insultingly rushed, space battle between cosmic planet people folk. Yeah, look, show, even if you pretend you have a story that matters beyond people who see a high-class meal as a filet mignon hot pocket, you still had to follow up all that supposed epicness with this.
Ah! Oh no, I'm late for school again.
Yeah, I bet you thought this was going to be a big space opera with action, drama, and exotic locations. But nope, it's just your common English-speaking town that has everything in Japanese for some reason.
Fucking nerve of these writers, right? Your epic sci-fi story followed by a scene of down-to-earth characters that the audience can better relate to, and make it easier for them to enter the world. I've always said that it would have been better if George Lucas removed the scene from Star Wars where it's just Luke sitting at the dinner table with his aunt and uncle, because it just gets in the way of the laser fighting. Wait, I never said that because that's stupid. I mean, just in comparison to from one of my other favorite animes of all time, Zeta Gundam, which opens in space and then follows that with a scene of the actual main character, Camille, playing hooky from school. It's not just a great opportunity to learn a bit about Camille personally and to be introduced to him, but also sets up the chance encounter that would get him in trouble.
Serena!
I gotta go!
Aren't you forgetting something, dear?
Oh yeah, your nose! Everyone's forgetting those around here. This is Serena, a ditzy clod who has no idea that she is one of the reincarnations of the Sailor Scouts. She's just your everyday gigantic-eyed blonde Japanese girl who constantly keeps flunking her exams.
Oh, chill out, Serena. It's just one lousy test. It's not like it's the end of the world or something.
You don't understand, I'm Japanese! To me, failure is everything!
Oh god, Doug, no! Perhaps that G4 comparison in the opening was more comparable than I thought.
Being pretty as sin and dumb as cheese, she of course is very popular in school, obtaining all sorts of friends, like an over-the-top accent with a human attached to it, and the awkward years of Dr. Insano's puberty.
You're going shopping? What's more important than your grades?
Science, of course!
That joke was very timely and relevant now.
She also seems to get in fights with an attractive boy named Darian.
What was that you were saying about someone totally cool? But we can be sure it isn't you. Shouldn't you be going home and doing your homework, meatball head?
Hey, that is clearly an insult to meatballs.
Well, how's this for inspiration? You're a creep, Darian! You don't know a thing about being cool!
Wow, they really seem like polar opposites and hate each other to the core. They hook up? Nah, and how tediously long do they drag that out? Oh Jesus, just mail me the comedic banter to my office, Shredder!
I wouldn't say it was that long. They're officially a couple by the second season.
By the way, here's a confusing scene. We see her walk by a poster of a young girl dressed exactly how she is dressed. Like it's from a movie or a show or something.
Yes, it is a coincidence that a Japanese schoolgirl would be wearing a schoolgirl uniform.
I wish I could be like Sailor V. She's so beautiful and smart. Something exciting's always happening in her life, not like mine.
So, what? A movie or TV industry got wind of this idea that coincidentally is exactly the same as what's going on right now? Does that mean that something like Transformers is a true story then? Because to be fair, my car has been giving me dirty looks.
No, it's because if you actually finished the season, you would know that Sailor Venus, or Sailor V, actually got her powers before Sailor Moon, and had her own series of adventures prior to Sailor Moon becoming a hero. That's why people know who Sailor V is.
Things seem to change. That is, the formula is set in motion when a magic cat named Luna arrives and tells her that she is the reincarnation of one of the Guardians. And of course, this gives way to the famous transformation scene. The tiara, the boots, the nail polish, later covered by gloves, so that was pointless. And of course, the miniskirt. The mini skirt.
I mean, have you never seen a figure skater before?
Yep, the costume choice that in no way enables her to fight better, but sure does force her to squat a lot.
Oh, shock. That skirt is too short. You could see her bare ankles.
Okay, so take out the fact that it's obviously in no way battle armor.
If you want to talk about impractical costume design, you should see any Rob Liefeld comic from the same decade.
Take out the fact that it's obviously fan service.
Wait, what? What about it is obviously fan service? That she's wearing a short skirt?
Take out the fact that just like He-Man, somehow removing more clothes bizarrely disguises them.
I mean, the whole point of the Sailor Moon transformation is that she's putting clothing on, not taking it off.
Though to be fair with both these outfits, is the face really the first thing you're going to be looking at? Take all that away and just tell yourself, this obviously sexualized transformation.
I mean, it's obviously over-sexualized if you get a hard-on from seeing a fucking Barbie doll without clothes on.
That takes up a solid minute in each episode happens to a 14-year-old girl. Yeah, forgot that for a second, didn't you? The girls in this show are, and always have been, 14 years old. 14 years old. 14 years old.
Who the fuck at Channel Awesome has pictures of 14-year-olds? That's way fucking creepier than this.
14, damn! Years old. Though to be fair with both these outfits, is the face really the first thing you're going to be looking at? Now, before any of you find this incredibly creepy, let me make one thing perfectly clear. The age of consent in many parts of Japan is in fact 13 years old.
I actually did my research on this. It's actually not true. I'm not sure where Doug got his information from, because, you know, I looked at the end credits of this video and the description, and there's no sources. I don't know where Doug got his information on this, but I shudder to think where. And even if this information were objectively correct, I still think it would be irresponsible to not include sources to that information. So at the risk of ending up on a government watch list, I ended up doing my research. It is true that the national minimum age of consent in Japan was 13 until last year. Many prefectures also had their own laws which effectively raised the age of consent in those areas. So, for example, the age of consent in Tokyo was 18. As for whether or not many parts of Japan had the age of consent at 13, the only areas of Japan I could find which did have the age of consent set at 13 were the Marcus Islands and the Okonotori Islands. Possibly more, but it's not like Doug was able to give example either.
Now you may find it incredibly creepy. And yes, there's a lot of fine print to that law that evens it out a bit, but there's just as much fine print that evens it back into kinky territory again. For example, sex between 13 to 17-year-olds can only be done with other 13 to 17-year-olds.
That's good.
However, that's only sex. Groping, handjobs, blowjobs, and whatever else your preferred imagination can come up with is all perfectly legal.
Doug, do you actually think that oral sex doesn't count as sex? Who told you that? Bill Clinton?
That's bad.
However, they have cracked down on human trafficking, forced prostitution, and other illegal acts endangering people in that age range.
That's good.
But that doesn't stop people from creating kinky establishments like the Sexual Harassment Corporation, where you pay to molest girls in school and business sets and is totally 100% legal.
And unless there's any evidence that those women have been forced into it or are underage, as far as we know, that's just roleplay.
So, yeah, I guess when you come down to it, it is just cultural differences. I mean, sexual urges in young people does start well before 18. My personal problem is, like media in most cultures, it doesn't try to help younger people understand sexuality, but rather exploits it. Rather than educate young people about sex, it's honestly just easier if we can make money off of it.
Okay, so, easy hypothesis about how sex sells. Yeah, I understand that. Now obviously, Sailor Moon was created by a woman, and I feel like I'm definitely going to have someone bring up the fact that, but Kenzie, even though Sailor Moon was created by a woman, the animated series was adapted by and mainly worked on by men. Which, true, there is certainly stuff that the original author probably didn't agree with as an adaptation of her work. It still doesn't change the fact that the costumes are mainly unchanged from the original source material, or that they were still aiming for the same target audience as the original source material. Sailor Moon, for all intents and purposes, at least in the West, is still considered a girly show, like Powerpuff Girls. I seriously don't think that the show would have even made it to Western television, let alone in child-friendly time slots, even with or without censorship, if this content was genuinely of concern. Especially considering how censorious and trigger-happy American networks and reactionaries were at the time.
But, of course, all this talk about Sailor Moon being a sexy 14-year-old pinup is all building up to one important question. Given this information, why did I still put her in the top 11 hottest anime women list? I didn't know! I swear I didn't know! I mean, look at the way they're drawn, man! I thought they were in college or at the very least late high school. Wouldn't you have made that guess? Come on, look at the way they're showing them off! I swear, audience, I had no idea their real age.
See, this scene could be funny, if I hadn't seen it done better by Ben Affleck and Mallrats.
I mean, you might be saying to yourself, oh, what, didn't you grow up watching the show? Didn't you pay attention to it at all? No, I didn't! I mean, I watched it, but I didn't really listen to it. I too was 14 at a time, and maybe I viewed it for different reasons.
So, we are now about to approach probably the worst part of the video. Now, say what you will about Nostalgia Critic reviews and skits, this the worst skit he has ever done. Yes, worse than anything in the wall.
Oh my god, this is awful.
Turn that back on.
Who said that?
I did.
Penis?
Yeah.
You can talk?
All penises talk around this age. It's the greatest secret no woman knows about, but wouldn't be the least bit shocked to discover.
This is the worst thing that the Nostalgia Critic has ever filmed, simply by the fact that it consists of Doug shaking and gyrating his crotch in front of the camera. And all for the courtesy of played-out generic sex joke about how men just can't help themselves because they got their brain in their penis. I feel sorry for the camera crew.
Excuse me, I have some memories I need to repress. So Serena seems shocked that she can now suddenly transform, though weirdly enough doesn't look the least bit shocked while she's transforming. In fact, I bet she'll keep this exact same calm state every single time she changes, and every villain she's fighting will quietly wait for her to finish before actually attacking. It's the Japanese way.
See, I don't mind this part of the video, you know, softly mocking, yet kind of funny pointing out of conventional tropes of Sentai-inspired media, I think is pretty fair in fact. If not for a 5-minute digression about the age of consent, and talking about Japan like it's this libertarian sex tourist paradise, I probably wouldn't have bothered making a video.
Speaking of which, there actually is a villain in this series, known as Queen Beryl. Yes, because no name is more terrifying than a wooden container that can bring me alcohol. Actually, you sure she's not the hero? She uses her evil minion named Jedite. Too obvious.
He's named after a fucking mineral, not Jedi, you pleb!
To get energy out of the people of Earth, all to serve the evil realm of the Negaverse. And to do this, by creating various monsters targeting people's lust for jewelry, pop singers, fitness, and pretty much anything exploiting the empty shallowness of all mankind. So naturally, Serena is never far behind, often falling for the majority of his evil plans. Please get in this evil device, which is in no way an evil device. Joke's on you, it was an evil device.
Okay, so far the second half of this video actually isn't too bad.
But once Luna reminds Serena to use her brain, she goes through her pedalicious
No, we're done talking about that, move on.
transformation and is ready to kick ass.
I wanna go home!
Or cowers in the corner like a fucking scaredy cat. In fact, the fucking scaredy cat is braver than her! That's exactly what she's doing! She's running from a real fight!
Come on, you idiot! Don't pussy out! Pussy up!
Well, it'll probably surprise no one that Sailor Moon actually does very little physical fighting in this show. Which is no big shock if she even raises her knee a centimeter to kick, she exposes her goodies to the world. Which in many parts of Japan, of course, is no big problem anyway.
Stop.
Most of the fight scenes require her being trapped or stuck in something for probably longer than is needed. But hey, anything to save on that action-packed detailed animation that we're just going to repeat anyway. In fact, the one you'll see most often next to the transformation sequence is her using a magic tiara which turns her enemies to dust. Or, in this case, the guy doing the magic act next door comes to save her, then allowing her to throw her goddamn tiara. This is Tuxedo Mask, and yes, it is painfully obvious who it really is. But please don't tell Serena, she's not very bright. The magic tiara isn't her only enchanted device, though. She also has a pen that can change her into anything. Wait, what?
It's a very powerful transforming tool. It turns you into whatever you want.
Well, then what the fuck is she using that tiara for? I mean, they didn't give any limitations or anything. They said she can change into fucking anything she wants. Hey, why doesn't she just turn around and be like,
Take on the form of Godzilla!
And besides, we know she's gonna leave the real fighting to the other Sailor Scouts. The other reincarnations of the Scouts are found over time, usually in the exact same city and often even the exact same school. Their personalities are about as on par as, oh, let's say, the Spice Girls. No, that's too demeaning. Let's say handsome.
Oof! Doug, that hurts.
To answer your question, yes, every kid snickered like an idiot when they heard there really was a Sailor Uranus.
Oh, sorry. My gag reflexes triggered when I saw Minions.
Actually, things got kind of interesting with her character, seeing how Uranus and Neptune were cousins in the show, but not in the Japanese version.
That seems like a very odd way to phrase that sentence, Doug. The Japanese version is the show.
No. In the Japanese version, they were a couple. That's right, straight up lesbians.
What was that?
Nothing, I said nothing! Yeah, kind of funny how we can sex up our 14-year-olds all we want, but the idea of them being attracted to something that don't have a penis apparently was too much for Americans back then. So just to check. Okay, shame. Okay, shame.
See, I don't necessarily disagree what Doug is saying here. That homophobia, especially compared to a lot of the stuff that people are permissive of, is incredibly silly. At the same time, I really don't feel comfortable with Sailor Moon being one of the examples compared.
Come on, guys, maybe you could have worked it into your half-ass PSAs at the end. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's PSAs in this show. Obviously slapped on at the end of each episode using the same animation they used before. Because Lord knows, the show hasn't repeated enough animation already. Yeah, if they want a more appropriate ending, they'd go with something like this.
Hey kids! A lot of time we get angry letters from your parents because we know our show makes you dumber.
Or in the case of the lesbian duo, maybe they can do something like,
Hey kids! You got boys and you got girls. Pick one!
Doc! I'm sorry, but Nostalgia Critic really cannot pull off edgy humor like this. Stick to talking dick jokes.
And guys, that's as far as I got. I know there's more characters and more villains, but I specifically wanted to address the repeated formula that got Sailor Moon popular in the US.
Huh, that's a relief. For a minute there, I thought you were talking about how ashamed you were you put a cartoon 14-year-old on your sexy women list.
And that formula, as I can figure out, is as such. Serena acts like a selfish idiot. Supportive friends pick up her slack. Barrel rubs Crystal Ball like a boob and sends Jedi out to create monster and/or device to obtain energy, using a marketing tool targeted towards vain suburbanites. One of the scouts discovers the plan or falls for it herself. Transformation takes place via reused sexually confusing animation. Scout or scouts are trapped. Pratt in the Hat seems to get them out and do nothing else. Serena never figures out who he is, uses her magic tiara that she should have used earlier instead of reusing more dialogue footage, destroys villain, and goes back to being an idiot again.
Okay, this formula summary isn't actually that bad.
So, yeah, just to double check again, why did this work? Perhaps like a lot of other formulas, it knew what to keep familiar and what to keep changing up. It knew it was going to have a villain, but it changed up what kind of villain. It knew it had to involve an interest or product that girls wanted to be involved with, so it had a different one each episode. There was always peril that the girls had to get out of so that you'd feel great by the end when they finally do. Keeping the formula exactly the same, but changing up just the right elements that needed to be changed. So, do I enjoy the show? Fuck no. Does it have an ingenious formula? Fuck yes. Is it bad for kids? Fuck, not really.
So, wait a minute. You're talking about the show and accusing it of objectifying a 14-year-old, but you don't think that's harmful to minors? It's almost like you want to accuse the show of being blatant hephebophile bait, but don't want to commit to that argument because of how bad it might make you look.
While the Serena character is an annoying airhead, I will give her credit that she does at the very least have a character. It's not one that I like, but at the same time, it would have been easy just to make her a pretty face with no personality. But she clearly does have a personality and goes to big extremes. And they do make her look strange and bizarre just as much as they do make her look pretty half the time. And though, yeah, she can be self-centered, she's never really mean per se. And I guess from what I understand, the character does get smarter as the series goes on. Or at the very least, braver. As for sexing up a 14-year-old... I think it's weird, but I guess there's always just gonna be cultural differences.
Cultural differences isn't an excuse.
And in all honesty, we've let out much worse.
Okay, we brought up the whataboutism of America doing it, because Toddlers in Tiaras, a show where a bunch of weird parents put their real kids on display, is totally the same thing as a bunch of Japanese animators drawing ink and paper.
Unlike a lot of pop stars and teen magazines where the artificiality is all that's there, this at least allows girls the fantasy of being the hero and actually doing something, even if it is mixed in with that artificiality as well. But I don't know if Serena's dummy reaction to it all always shows it in such a good light. But the moments where she fights back and saves the day is always shown in a good light. So have fun with your little show, just keep it as far away as you can from me.
I would gladly do so. And then the review ends on a joke about the failure of Demo Reel. And also after the credits, Doug talks a bit about his Indiegogo campaign, which would also go tits up. Probably should have removed that from the YouTube re-upload, eh, Dougie? So that was the Nostalgia Critics video on Sailor Moon. How does it hold up? Well, it was never good to begin with, but... So things have changed in 10 years. The Gen Xer something awful brained cynicism of the late 2000s and early 2010 has largely disappeared from anime discussion. And yes, while there are still people who exist who will tell you about how weird and gross anime is, from people who don't really know how to stay in their own lane, a lot of that discussion really hasn't stuck to Sailor Moon. A lot more people would call Sailor Moon feminist than objectifying or creepy. You know what I said earlier about Doug likely not holding a lot of the views in this video 10 years later?
But as mentioned before, anime played a big part in Toonami's lineup, and one of anime's biggest names is Sailor Moon.
Ugh, no need. I've covered this before.
But I can cover it correctly.
Oh my God! Burned by that!
Well, there actually is a section in Doug Walker's Toonami video where he does give a re-review of the show to another person for about 5 minutes, which in that small section of the Toonami video does more justice to Sailor Moon than Doug did in his whole 20-minute episode. If you were looking to watch Sailor Moon today, it's a lot easier than it was back in 2013. The show and manga got re-licensed, and a lot more reappraisal for the show. The only real Japanese media that Doug Walker is interested in is either Kingdom Hearts or some normie Studio Ghibli movies, and which is fair enough. The Sailor Moon fandom, at least as far as I can tell in the West, is probably as strong as it's ever been. And really any attempts to kind of slander the show have never really stuck. In fact, the show is probably as popular and renowned globally as something as Dragon Ball or... I hope the Doug Walker fans on this video don't take what I have to say too personally. I don't have a problem if you still enjoy his content. Brad Jones is objectively better though. Let's hope we can all learn from this.